An overview of Factories Act 1948. Major components of Factories Act 1948: factory, manufacturing process, and worker. A factory, as covered under the Act, is a premises including precincts at which on any day during the last 12 months, a manufacturing process carried on with power and 10 or more workers, or without power and 20 or more workers, and state government can make rules on approval, licensing and registration of a factory. A manufacturing process involves making, altering, repairing, finishing, packing or washing, cleaning, demolishing or treating any article or substance with a view to its use, sale, transport, delivery or disposal, and it includes transmission of power, pumping of oil, sewerage, printing, cold storage, shipbuilding and such other activities. A worker under the Act is anyone who is employed in a manufacturing process or in cleaning any part of the machinery or premises of a process. He might be directly or indirectly recruited for a remuneration or otherwise, with or without the knowledge of the principal employer. Health aspects covered under the Act: cleanliness, latrines, etc., lighting, drinking water, ventilation and temperature. The Act specifies under cleanliness every factory to be kept clean with the removal of dirt, refuse from floors, floor wash and proper water drainage, whitewash every 14 months and painting every 5 years, with the proper records maintained for the periodicity of painting, whitewash and the related things. The Act covers the origins of dust and fume to be properly covered with the exhaust appliances, with arrangements made to enclose such points, clean and hygienic spittoons, properly maintained, ventilated and lighted toilets, conveniently accessible to workers at all times, suitable and sufficient lighting including skylights, prevention of glare and shadow to protect from accidents, wholesome drinking water points, sufficient, accessible and hygienic, being away by a minimum of 6 meters from urinals, latrines, spittoons and washing places. The Act prescribes proper ventilation to ensure circulation of fresh air, insulation of hot spots to separate temperature from the work process, along with the allotment of specified space for each worker to avoid overcrowding, and artificially regulating the humidity of air at workplaces. Under safety of workers, the Act covers factory of hazardous process, the process per se, hazardous substance, health and safety policy, and the responsibility of the occupier. For any factory involving an hazardous process, either for setting up or for expansion, government approval is required to be obtained. An appraisal committee appointed by the government will review every application and give its recommendation to the government within a period of 90 days from the date of application. A hazardous process refers to any process or activity in relation to an industry specified in the first schedule to the Act, wherein unless special care is taken, the raw materials, byproducts or wastes of the process are likely to cause material impairment to the health of persons engaged, and they are also likely to pollute general environment. As regards obligations of occupier on hazardous substances, disclose dangers and hazards to workers and implement measures to overcome such hazards. Lay down procedures for handling, usage, storage and disposal of such substances. Have emergency and disaster control plan for employees and people in the vicinity. Have fire precaution systems and proper safety officers, and above all, publicize the measures among employees and public. Occupier is responsible for safety of workers with proper measures on fencing of machinery and special care in respect of lifting machines, revolving machines and self-acting machines, highlighting devices for cutting off power, protection of eyes from fumes and gases, and proper coverage of sump openings. The occupier under the Act is one who has the ultimate control over the affairs of the factory. He can be a partner, director or one who manages affairs of the company. He needs to send to Chief Inspector a notice before using any premises with the details of the location, nature of manufacturing process, detail of workers, and he shall ensure health, safety and welfare of every worker in the factory. The aspects covered under employment of women and young people is women, young persons, child worker, certificate of fitness and certified surgeons. As regards employment of women, not more than 9 hours a day of work, and working hours strictly between 6 a.m. and 7 p.m. It gives liberty for the state government to prescribe relaxation between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. Any change of shift can be only after a weekly holiday, and on dangerous machines, no women can be allowed to work. The Act prohibits employment of children who have not completed 14 years of age. A child worker must be above 14 years of age and carry certificate of fitness on the person. A female child worker can work only between 8 a.m. and 7 p.m. Per day hours of work cannot exceed 4.5, and child worker can work only in 2 shifts, and the spread in each shift should not be more than 5 hours. A certifying surgeon issues the certificate of fitness to the child worker, and it will be valid for 12 months, and it is issued against an application by the candidate along with the employment proposal from the factory, and the certifying surgeon's fee is borne by the factory or the occupant, and the certifying surgeon may revoke any time the certificate of fitness for valid reasons. Certifying surgeons are qualified medical practitioners appointed by state government. They are appointed for a specific factory or a class of factories or for a locality, and their functions include examination and certification of young persons and examination of persons engaged in factories involving dangerous occupations and processes, and exercising such medical supervision as may be prescribed for any factory or factories by the government. The Act mandates the factory manager to maintain a register of child workers detailing name and nature of work, the group in which the child is included, if in shifts, the relay to which he is allotted, and his certificate of fitness number and date. Welfare measures under the Act: washing and storing area, sitting area, first aid, canteen and creches, and welfare officers. The Act provides for clean and adequate change rooms with facilities to store clothes that are not worn during working hours, and it also specifies screened areas separately for men and women workers. The Act provides for sitting facilities for those workers who, as a part of the job, are required to be in standing position in the course of work, and it also mandates maintenance of first aid appliances and facilities under the control of a person holding certificate in first aid treatment. In a factory where more than 250 workers are there, canteens are required to be set up either directly or through contractors. The running expenses of canteens should not be passed on to workers, and the Act also provides for maintenance of restrooms and lunchrooms adequate in size, properly lighted and ventilated, and maintained in a clean and cool condition. Where women employees are more than 30, it is required for the company to maintain creches for workers' children under 6 years under the care of trained women who can take care of children and infants. And where the number of workers employed is more than 500, it is required to have adequate number of welfare officers as prescribed. As for provisions on working hours and leave, working hours, holidays, overtime, annual leave, and payment of wages. The permitted working hours for an adult is 9 hours a day, and a stretch of work with rest interval not to exceed 5 hours in a day, including the rest interval. Total working hours not to exceed 10.5 hours. In a week, working hours allowed are 48, and the name, nature of work and shift allowed will be specified in the register of adult workers as required. One of the 3 days before or after the first day of every week must be a holiday. If there is a change in the holiday, inspector has to be informed and it has to be displayed in the factory. Where a weekly holiday is deprived, it has to be allowed in the same month or within 2 months, and the holiday period means a period of 24 hours from the end of shift. A worker, if he is already working in a factory, he is prohibited from concurrently working in another factory. The Act prohibits double employment. Overtime wages are payable at twice the ordinary rate of wages, and overtime wages are due for work more than 9 hours a day or more than 48 hours in any week. 240 days in a calendar year required to be worked to be eligible for annual leave. Adults, 1 day for every 20 working days. Children, 1 day for every 15 days is the eligibility in a calendar year. Half a day or more converted into full and less than half ignored. Carry forward 30 days allowed for adults and 40 days allowed for children. For availing leave, 15 days in advance one has to submit application to the manager and it cannot be refused except as per scheme. Leave wages are calculated based on daily average earning for the immediately preceding month. If the immediately preceding month doesn't have working days, then it will be taken from the current month for the actual days worked. Leave has to be paid before the leave begins for an adult going on leave for 4 days and above, and for a child going on leave for 5 days and above. Any final settlement to be made within 2 working days of discharge, dismissal or quitting, and it shall be made within 2 months of superannuation or death in service.
Progress review on Factories Act. If the factory has more than 1000 workers, there is a need to appoint security officer. Fencing of machinery is a safety measure. For every 150 workers, there should be an easily accessible and fully maintained first aid box. Every 14 months, there should be a whitewash or color wash done in the factory premises. Cool drinking water during hot weather has to be provided for separately the moment the number of workers is 250 and above. Canteen also should be provided and maintained by the occupier if the staff strength is 250 and above. Women are to be employed only between morning 6 o'clock till 7 o'clock in the evening as per section 66. Female child aged 14 and above allowed to work between 8 a.m. and 7 p.m. Creche to be maintained for usage of children under the age of 6 years where their mothers are working, and the number of women should be more than 30. An adolescent worker is one who is 14 years plus. Only when he crosses 14 years, he is eligible to work. No child means one who is above 14 is allowed to work unless he has completed 14th year. A child who has completed 14th year, he should have a certificate of fitness, and that certificate of fitness has to be kept in the custody of the manager where the child is working. It is a mandatory requirement. The certificate of fitness is given by a certifying surgeon who is meant to issue the same. It is valid for 12 months and at the end of 12 months it has to be renewed, and every worker has to get a full day rest, weekly rest of 24 hours, and preferably it should be the first day of the week, that is on Sunday. If they do not get it on Sunday, they have to get it within the next 3 days of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and if the weekly off or compensatory holidays are kept pending to be used, they have to be availed within 2 months from the date it accrues. It is mandatory. And leave, when it is not availed, it is carried forward. There are 2 limits. In case of adults, they can carry forward leave to the extent of 30 days, and child worker can carry forward to the extent of 40 days. And whenever a person wants to go on leave, the application has to be in writing. It should be made to the manager of the factory, and it should be made at least 15 days before the date on which the leave is to begin, and worker has to make the application. When a person is dismissed, any leave standing to his credit has to be encashed. He is entitled to the wages in lieu of the balance lying in his credit. For every 240 days, a person gets 30 days of working leave, but in calculation of 240 days of working, if there was a strike and no work was happening, that strike period will not be included into 240. It will be as good as non-working day. Therefore, it is not used in the calculation of leave entitlement. And maximum hours an adult can work in a factory is 9 hours in a day. Anything a person works more than the normal hours, he is entitled to get wages for overtime at the rate of 2 times, twice his ordinary rate of wages. Even plantations are covered by Factories Act, and they are treated as an industrial establishment, and the person who is responsible for the operation of the company and who is having ultimate control over the affairs of the factory is known as the occupier, and who is the responsible officer under the Factories Act. People in a factory work in different shifts and they are termed as relays. Two or more sets of workers carrying out the same task in different periods, means different shifts, are termed as relays under Factories Act. And any happening or any event which the owner of the factory or occupier of the factory is required to inform the concerned authorities, he has to do it by way of a notice to the concerned officials on any happenings which deserve to be reported to the authority. And whenever a company wants to establish a factory involving hazardous process, it has to submit an application, and that application will be examined by a site appraisal committee nominated by the government. An employee who is on a full-time basis, he can work only in one factory. He cannot work in two factories because that will become double employment. Section 60 of the Factories Act prohibits double employment. There are inspectors who are authorized officials under the Factories Act. They have wide powers. They can enter into any place of factory. They can make enquiry into any accident which has happened inside the factory. They can seize and take copies of any document which they require and which is available in the factory. And it is obligatory on the part of the occupier of the factory not to obstruct the inspector. Anyone who obstructs an inspector attracts penalty which is prescribed in the Factories Act.